Hello, we are going to get started, and I'm going to go ahead and just announce. So this is our parenting tips and tricks. We're going to be learning how to support our neurodiverse children. My name is Colleen Shaw, and I am an executive function coach. Here's a little bit about me. Hello, welcome, come on in. So I am an educator. I got my master's in education at Boston University. I grew up in this area most of my life. I moved when I was 5. I've always been neurodiverse, but didn't really have the language, didn't have a diagnosis, just kind of struggled in different ways throughout, different educational experiences, mainly in college. And so I've always also worked with children and really gravitated towards this role in teaching. When I became an executive function skill coach, I was working in a nonprofit in Boston running a program called Read to a Child. And it was my first job out of my master's. I had a 1-year-old at home. And it was my lowest paying job I'd ever had in my whole life. So as I'm at an event, networking for the nonprofit, I met this man. His name is M.Ed. So for any of you, like someone had asked me at one of my previous presentations, they're like, do we take notes? It's totally a personal preference. If you hear something that resonates, you're like, I don't want to forget, I would write it down. I always have my phone notes out or something to just scribble on. But so this man's name is M.Ed, and he's written a book called Your Kid's Gonna Be Okay. And the company I worked for was called Beyond Book Smart, and they formally trained me as an executive function skill coach. Now this was the first time, even throughout my master's in education, I'd ever heard this term in my entire life. And so it was really eye-opening for me. A lot of bells went off in my mind. I was like, oh, that's what I've struggled with my whole life. And so not only did I learn how to be a coach and provide these skills and opportunities for children, but I also learned an immense amount myself and have since then kind of been working, and I'm a work in progress. So I coached from 2014 to 2015 and then branched off on my own and have been kind of navigating this by myself ever since. I've been in the classroom as a middle school teacher, humanities, different various roles, a 6th grade gen ed inclusion teacher. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of context about my experience and where I'll be coming from. Additionally, I'm a mom of 3. These are my babies, and my husband, my dog. I put their ages and kind of grades and stuff, so maybe you have kids in their classes, you might have heard their names. This is my first year at Country Day World School. I started in January, and I've been working here as an executive function coach for middle school and now also upper L. And I'm so pleased to be here. I have nothing but wonderful, positive things to say about this community, and it really delights me that we have this opportunity. We have this opportunity because of this amazing foundation, the Paula J. Stuart Endowment Fund for the Friends of Country Day. Because of that grant, we've been able to open up a neurodiversity committee for the first year. So this is our inaugural speaker series, and I'm so happy to be, and just humbled to be here with you tonight. I think that as we navigate this world of neurodiversity and the kind of modern challenges that present with technology, and just kind of the way that we have embraced differences among our learners, I think that these conversations are really needed and important in our community. So tonight I'll be talking to you about kind of an overview, just a little bit of brain basics. I'm not a neuroscientist, however, the brain research that's come out in the last 2 decades has changed the way we educate children. We know so much more about the function and some of the different ways that our nervous system can impact learning, and so it's really relative to the conversation. So we'll go over a little bit of brain basics, and then I'm going to define and talk about how and when executive function develops, what we can do as parents, teachers, caregivers, and then just a couple different components about connection leading into the integration of our brain and thus the development of our children's and ourselves executive function. So first and foremost, what is executive function? So this is basically a kind of simplified definition, but it's our brain's capacity to perform, to execute, to get things done. it describes the part of our brain that develops last. And so our brain develops from back to front. And when we're younger, we have kind of more primal reflexes. When we're babies, we cry when we're hungry, when our parents leave. And that kind of evolves over time and develops into more of a complex, sophisticated thinking. And so, sorry, see, neurodiverse. But this is our part of our brain that can develop well into our late 20s, which is the part of my training at Beyond Booksmart where I really, truly was eye-opened. I was 29 during this training, and so, oh, thank you so much. And so when I first discovered that our brains keep growing and that I can continue learning and developing my skill set, and it's not too late for my disorganized, chaotic existence, then it was such a huge sigh of relief. And so if I can communicate anything, it is that. It is that with a growth mindset and with kind of this idea that our brains have plasticity and we can continue to grow and learn, we can truly work at any deficit that you might have yourself or with your children. I'm going to be doing an additional book talk with a book called The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel. And so I'm pulling from his book a overview of the upstairs, downstairs brain. And so when you think about our brain and the way it develops from back to front, it also develops from bottom to top. And so our upstairs or our downstairs brain includes the brainstem, our limbic regions responsible for, just like those primal reflexes. Some people call it the reptilian brain, but this is like our brainstem, our emotional responses, like reflexive thinking. So it's more subconscious. We don't think about blinking. We don't think about when we're hungry necessarily, like we don't tell ourselves, like our body tells us. Our upstairs brain is where we kind of start to make sense of the world. It is made up of our cerebral cortex, and then the prefrontal cortex is where executive function develops predominantly. This is the part of our brain that helps with decision making, empathy, and just having that kind of inhibitory control, so impulse control and things like that. Our upstairs brain doesn't finish developing up until our 20s. So this kind of then leads into neurodiversity. So all of this is fine and great, but with our kids who are neurodiverse, you will notice that the development of their brains may not seem typical of certain developmental stages where kids should be at this age. And so I have my 12-year-old, my 8-year-old, my 5-year-old. My 5-year-old's currently going through this like tantrumy phase. And I've noticed how, I thought this was supposed to be earlier, right? Like 3, 4. And so it's possible that in certain parts of her brain, like she's just developing a little bit at a different pace, I think neurodiversity has to do with the way our brains are wired. And what we're learning is that we all think differently. We perceive the world differently. And so this is a term that kind of is all encompassing for just acknowledging our differences as thinkers and learners. However, it's also associated with kind of any diagnosis or, learning difference. And so a couple would be the ASD spectrum, ADHD, or any other kind of like learning challenges like dyslexia or sensory processing. So neurodiversity is not necessarily specific to one diagnosis or category. It's really just kind of something that we use to describe people that, may just see the world differently than we do. Okay, so here's something important to realize. So it's our first tip. Growing up, I was parented, and maybe this resonates with you, with parents that kind of associated my stress behavior with misbehavior. And so if I had a moment where I was struggling with something, it was like punished, like go to your room. And this is a super typical thing. I think that, the more we know now about the brain, the more we realize like, oh, this child's stressed or in a state of dysregulation, probably because they have some neurodivergence. But back then that was kind of not really always the case. So I think the first thing I would really encourage you is not just knowing the difference between misbehavior and stress behavior with your child, but also kind of recognizing within yourself, what does stress behavior look like for me? This was another real eye-opener moment for me, that when I'm stressed, and this is something like as a teacher, they teach you kind of in classroom management, if a teacher's having a bad day, the kids are crazy that day. And you kind of have to realize that our behavior really impacts the people around us. And so as a parent, it's really challenging when you have, you're working and you have neurodiverse kids with emotional needs, and you also are not necessarily meeting your own emotional needs. And so it can be a really kind of chaotic and explosive situation. So I want you to turn and talk just to whoever's around you, and if you don't want to turn and talk, that's okay. But go ahead and just think about for a second, visualize in your mind, or turn and talk to the people next to you. What does it look like when your child is having like a stress response? Like when they're dysregulated, what kind of behaviors are you noticing?
Oh, man.
My son's so mad. Like the worst tone how much watching the film. I feel like I should be yeah, they always like throw me back at you. I'm like, can I do that?
All right, so for those of you who heard something that really resonated with you, or kind of want to share an example, give me some examples of some stress behavior with our kids. What do we got?
I hate you.
Good, thank you. Yes, I hate you. I've heard that in my house more than one time. Yes, I hate you. What else?
Sometimes he'll like pinch at himself, or like if he's really, stressed out or dysregulated, like pinching at his body or
Yeah. Okay.
around him.
That's a good one too, right? So like over just kind of like physical, trying to get some kind of sensory response, or like really, have that tactile sense. What else?
Throwing themselves onto furniture.
Yeah.
The couch.
Okay.
And screaming.
Good.
Yeah, screaming. Yeah, it's a lot of
Lots
volume,
of screaming. Yes.
tone and
That's one of my triggers, the screaming. It's really hard for me to sit with the screaming. Yeah. Okay, so now let's flip it inside. So tell me about your own stress response. Like, obviously, we're not throwing ourselves on furniture and telling, well, maybe. I mean, but yeah, go ahead and you can, again, like, why don't we do this one as like a whole group? So raise your hand or just shout out, tell me some of your own kind of behaviors that when you're in a state of dysregulation, like, what are you seeing? Yes, thank you.
I can be mean to others.
It's a good one, very reflective. Yep.
Raising my voice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Overeating.
Okay.
My
Cool.
wife says I mess with my hair.
That's what your wife said?
Yeah.
Do you notice
I don't
it?
even notice I'm doing it.
You don't even, yeah, well, so this is kind of like key here. I think that it's really important to recognize, like, yes, when we're stressed, like, we have to really be in tune and kind of notice what those cues are. For me, I was a voice raiser, a yeller, until I had a neurodiverse child who that did not work anymore. When I yelled, he got worse. When I dug my heels in, he dug his heels in deeper, and he's way more stubborn than me. So I was like, I give up, I don't know what to do. And that's kind of when I started to look for resources and found Dr. Becky Kennedy, who has a really cool social media platform, and she wrote Good Inside Community. And just knowing the language to use when he's in these states started my journey into kind of learning how to help him regulate and start co-regulating. Okay, I have a video to show you, but I'm gonna have to leave for a second. Is that okay? All right, so hold on one second.
I'm not good enough. You have to score, right?
Okay.
But if you want to pick her design, put too much pressure on her.
So this is Inside Out 2, if you have or haven't seen it, and it's a scene where at the end of the movie, anxiety has taken over Riley's brain, and she is in a complete and utter state of dysregulation. Her behavior looked like misbehavior. She checked someone, like, she didn't necessarily look stressed, she just looked mean. But inside her brain, this is what's happening. And so I love how Disney can personify emotion to, like, feel real.
get to choose who Riley is. Anxiety?
Notice how her voice changes.
You need to let her go.
So I want you to just notice a couple things, right? So I think as parents, it's really, really tricky to notice when our children are not necessarily responding from a clear-headed place. And so when we go back to the brain, if we go back to the previous, now it's not working. I'm so sorry. I think it just needs to be taken out of this mode and put back into presentation mode. We're just gonna go with it. So when you think about the brain from the whole brain child, to integrate the upstairs and the downstairs brain. So the downstairs brain is those primal reflexes. This is fight, flight, or freeze. Like our body's designed so beautifully to protect us, especially with things that are hard and feel uncomfortable. And for our neurodiverse children, a lot of things are hard. Our world is not necessarily set up for them. You know, we joked about the sensory deprivation and being in a nice, quiet, intimate room. But the reality is that is so real. For some of us, having the lights on all day can truly make us feel so terrible and anxious that when we come home, we don't want to talk to anybody. We don't want to be touched. We don't want to clean anything up. We don't want to eat your dinner. Like, we may just need time alone. So I think it's really important, first and foremost, to know your kid and kind of try to get inside their own head and know what are their triggers, but equally important to know what are your triggers. Like, I had to learn kind of that I am that person. Like, I do like to come home and I'm teaching all day. I'm with kids all day. I want to be touched. My daughter's hanging all over me. And so I had to make this really tough choice last year to create a business instead of teaching full time so that I could be the mom and the person I wanted to be. Because I just realized that it wasn't going to be effective for me to have myself in this position where I couldn't be the mom I wanted to when I got home. And so I know that's not for everybody, but that was something I was really willing to sacrifice. But the integration of the upstairs and downstairs brain happens with understanding that your child's in a state of stress. And then the next slide, which hopefully, oh, yay, okay, is incredibly important to this. So the tip is to notice when it's a misbehavior versus stress behavior. The trick is validate to regulate. And so the feelings wheel is your best friend. Print one off or have it someplace on your photos. Anytime, I'm trying to help my children process emotion or recognize kind of what's happening within their own bodies, creating this mindset within them, they need to name it to tame it. It is just what it is. Like, so we need the language, explicit language, to help our children realize, oh, I notice you're feeling really frustrated. Now with our neurodiverse children, sometimes that will set them, like my daughter, I try that with her and she screams at me and she'll tell me, I'm not angry. So I can't necessarily, I have to think of these side door strategies with her. And it's really important and key to practice when they're not having meltdowns, right? So, and we'll get to some practical ways to do that later on. You need to hold space for them. So this one changed my life. Like when I realized that no one ever held space for me when I was that little, like they'd laugh at my tantrums, and my family's lovely, but it was just where we were at with what we knew about the brain and neurodiversity. So, now I kind of know that I can tell my kids, like, your big feelings don't scare me. I'm not going anywhere. They might tell you they hate you, that they don't want you there, but you tell them, well, I'm gonna stay right here until I know you're okay. I love you, I'll give you space, but I'm gonna stand right outside your door. Like, our kids in these moments, they want us, they need us, but sometimes they don't have the words to say it, and they're so terrified of their own emotion that they just are reacting to it, and that's what you're seeing. I love the line too from, these are this second one, this hold space, and this is all Dr. Becky. You're a good kid having a hard time. That one's a huge one. For my 8-year-old, I think when he would have stress behavior at school, he'd get in trouble. And his go-to was laughing. So he'd do something and then the teachers would reprimand him and he would laugh at them. And they would get so angry with him and I'd get the nastiest emails. Your son did this and he doesn't care. And I'm thinking, well, he's 6, so I'm sure he does, but he also doesn't have the emotional regulation to handle what he's dealing with right now, because shame sits right next to vulnerability. So for our kids to be vulnerable, they need to feel safe, and a lot of our kids, we're working on this, right? Like, that's why we're here and having these conversations, so they can feel safe at school. But a lot of kids want to save face and necessarily aren't really open to processing that emotion in school. My Wawa tantrum story, I just want to be cognizant of time. I don't want to go over too long, but so a really great example of this is my mother watched my children a couple weeks ago. She picked them up from school. My daughter is picked up from school. She was so hungry and tired, and so just very tantrumy, like really shrill. And so my mother took them to Wawa because they had to go to the bathroom. Now my daughter's 5, she's at a Montessori school. She wants to do everything herself. And so my mother is like the opposite and wants to do everything for her. And they get in a power struggle at the Wawa bathroom. And my daughter threw herself on the floor, refused to open the door of the bathroom. My mom's climbing under the stall. In my mind, I'm kind of giggling at this, but this is super stressful for all people involved. My 12-year-old, who's a saint, grabs her after, she's scratching him, and they get in the car. My mother calls me, and she's just talking about how Maggie's misbehaving. Magnolia needs to say sorry to Nana. And I am just, these are kind of the ways that I think that to show up for our children, we have to be able to recognize those moments where they don't need that. That's gonna make it worse. What they need from us is to just kind of meet them where they're at and provide that co-regulation. And so, my mom, obviously, like, I've kind of learned all these things as I reparent myself and my children. And so God bless her. I love her to pieces. She's a lovely woman. But yeah, she doesn't have that emotional regulation herself. She's a suppressor, she's an internalizer. And so without that language, without that skill set, there's no way she can show up for my daughter in that moment. And all emotions are okay. We don't need to kind of dig into this, but just know that anything your child is feeling, it is okay, it is healthy, and that this is how they are going to make sense of their world, and that our job is not to take away any emotion, especially the difficult ones. Our job is to help them cope with it, to see them and make sure that they're safe. And then finally, I just have validate to regulate, help them move their body. I noticed that when my daughter at nighttime, she's really having a hard time holding her tight, rocking her like a baby, almost soothes her every time. Sound is really important. Anything you can do to get the child moving, and then of course, breathing exercises. And these are we're gonna follow up with this. So when your child is in a regulated state, and we call it like homeostasis, right? Which for neurodivergent children, it takes a lot of work to get your child to this place. That's where we're going to start to see executive function develop. Now, executive function remembering is like how to perform and execute tasks. A lot of this, or all of this, is built under this idea of metacognition. In order to develop our skill set, we have to have an awareness of where we're at and this conscious thought. So metacognition is thinking, the capacity to think about our own thinking. And this is a very advanced skill. So when you think about when the brain develops from back to front, this is a skill we're not going to see in children until they're adolescents and older, which is why I think executive function kind of develops a little bit later. So you have to know kind of what you're working towards, the skills that you have, and how you can continue to grow them, and what opportunities and experiences will help you with that in order to really kind of see your child in a place where they are autonomous and they are, regulating all on their own. So until we get to that stage, these 3 buckets are the skills that we're kind of always working on from when they're first born until they leave our house. And so the 3 categories that there's a lot of different ways to talk about executive function, but ultimately they can be categorized into 3 different ways. So cognitive flexibility, inhibitory control, and working memory. So these 3 kind of bigger overarching skills can help develop the skills that you see underneath. And so when we have neurodiverse kids, a lot of times they're going to struggle with either all or some of these different subsets and categories. I see the most clients that struggle with cognitive flexibility, and that's also kind of where we see a lot of conflict in the home among siblings. You have a lot of really rigid thinkers, or a lot of kids that kind of live in this state of chaos because of the dysregulation that they are really experiencing frequently. And so that cognitive flexibility is like organization, perspective taking, learning how to think about others, how to look at time. You know, we have some of these kind of diversities like ADHD or autism spectrum disorder. Kids have time blindness. They don't see time, they don't understand time. And so trying to help kids visualize, you know, themselves in time and space takes a little bit of practice and flexibility within their own minds. You also have inhibitory control, so being able to sustain attention, like choose to do something boring like homework over something fun like an iPad. Being able to stop yourself from having an emotional outburst, hitting your brother because they took something of yours. All of these things kind of fall under this idea of executive function, and this is our upstairs brain. Executive function is truly the skill set and behavior that predicts academic readiness and life success over pretty much any other indicator. So when we think about, you know, what we want to do as parents to encourage this, it is truly going to be working on allowing your child to develop their executive function. So how do we do this? Here are the 3 basic things that I can give you. I don't know if this is a tip or a trick, but the number one thing that you can do for your child, don't shoot the messenger, is they have to experience things. They have to experience all of the range of emotions. They have to experience failure. You have to be okay with watching your child struggle. This is how the brain learns. So if the brain were made of clay, experience are our hands that are shaping it. So a lot of our kids, especially our neurodiverse kids, are gonna learn through doing. And I'm sure you see this at home. It is because of neuroplasticity. And what we know now with brain imaging is that a growth mindset develops when you can make a mistake and then reflect on that mistake, and your brain grows. They have imaging to see it. So they've done experiments where you had a subset of kids who were gaming, and in the video game they made a mistake and they just moved on and they didn't want to think about it. It just felt too bad to make a mistake. And then you had a group of kids that thought about the mistake who, you know, took a minute, and then they watched the brain have a second flash. And so in our capacity to think about our own thinking and kind of sit with discomfort and negative experiences, positive experiences, our brain's gonna grow. Now, this is really hard for a lot of different kids, especially our challenging ones. And that's why you have to show up as a regulated parent and make space for it. You can't be as afraid of the wah-wah tantrum, because that's kind of, I think, essential for my daughter to recognize in that moment, you know, how to coach her on what she needs. Mirror neurons is such a fascinating topic. I could talk about it forever. I wish I knew more about it, but ultimately, our children are always watching us. If it's subconscious or conscious, like they're seeing things and they're taking it in. And so if I yawn, some of you might yawn too, and that's because of mirror neurons. There were a group of scientists, and they were observing, I think it was primates or monkeys, and one of them had a snack, and they noticed that the monkey wanted to eat too. And so this is something that with our young babies, our toddlers, our kids, like we have to kind of model what it is that we want to see. And so I'm neurodiverse, and this is kind of where I think learning and growing together is one of the most humbling experiences of parenthood, is that I had to kind of come to this place where I used to come at my kids and be like, well, I'm the boss, I'm the mom, and you're gonna do what I say. And that's how I was parented. But now I've realized that we're learning and growing together. And so I'm gonna make mistakes, and I will be the first person to apologize and own and reflect on that mistake when I yell at my kids. I'm going to yell at my kids. So that is something that's been, I think, really impactful and important for me. And then explicit teaching. We have the contentment curriculum here at Country Day School, and I just feel like we have a really loving and supporting community from a lot of the parents and faculty, the administration. Hearing Mr. Gillette speak at the Friends of Country Day Open Forum meeting, like the Paula J. Stuart Foundation, we have a lot of really caring, loving people. Look around this room, you've all shown up for your children. So I think here it's like one of our shining moments. Like we need to explicitly teach our children and have kind of access to some of the different things that the Contentment Foundation offers. So I put this note up here, Maggie's first month of school, she's coming home and writing these affirmations. And I can't tell you enough like how that narrative and that explicit language has really helped her just think these things, right? Because we teach them, we say it, we do the breathing, we say the affirmations, but like eventually they are gonna sink in. And so I love this. I am fun, I am loved, and she's fun again. She's super fun. Okay, so tip number 2. When we think about, okay, so now what? Like I've got all this great information, you know, how am I going to, you know, connect with my child when they're always in a state of dysregulation, or I'm always in a state of dysregulation? And here's kind of a couple things I can offer to you. So from Dan Siegel, it's not just the whole brain child, it's in all his books. It's one of his like major kind of tips that he shares that I use regularly. So this acronym called SIFT, S-I-F-T. This is a time where like you work with your child to just go through what are you sensing in this moment, or like you know, right now, this morning, today, like pick a time. What is the images in your brain? What are you feeling and what are you thinking? Just asking kids to do that practice is going to help them create mindsight, which is their capacity to think about their thoughts and to kind of have a sense of what's going on in their own brain. And so this is something really important for our kids to learn how to do and start to do that on their own. This can also be,
What does the SIFT stand for?
it stands for sensing. So what are the senses? Because when it comes to emotional regulation, we have to be able to kind of recognize when those feelings are coming. And for some of our kids, it's 0 to 60. So they get angry and they're angry like instantaneously. So they have to start to practice how to sense it. You know, what does it feel like when you're really, really mad? You know, for me, my hands ball up and I start breathing really heavily and my voice raises. Like I heard you guys say tone and I heard you say language. Like there are some cues here that we can start working with our children to recognize, and then also recognizing our own cues. The I is for images. And so for some of our kids, like it's their visuals, it's an experience, it's an implicit memory or an explicit memory, you know, something really, really scary or something that they are really not, like an image in their mind that could be Christmas. They're thinking, you know, so what are they imagining? What's their visuals? The F is feeling. That's more like not sensing, but more like how do I actually feel? Am I angry? Am I hungry? Am I lonely? And T is thoughts. The thought part is tricky because we have a lot of kids that just, they don't even know that they think. If you ask your child, like, what are you thinking about right now? They might go, I don't know. Like a lot of kids don't recognize that they have thoughts, and it's a lot of subconscious. So we want to try to bring that to the frontal lobe and get them talking about some of the things that they have. And then for our kids too, like some of our kids have that expressive language struggle where they don't have the language. And so I think that that's kind of where it's really important to help them recognize the feelings and the senses within themselves. The recall of daily events. This is one of Dan Siegel's best tips for integrating the upstairs and downstairs brain, so that in those moments where they're explosive and they're feeling things so deeply, they have the tools to express it. They have that language. So now you have to keep in mind too, and this is kind of where the stress versus misbehavior comes in. If they're coming home from school and they're tired and you have a neurodiverse kid that just had a lot of cognitive fatigue because they were attending all day and trying not to get in trouble and make the right choices, they don't want to talk to you, and I can guarantee it. They probably want to just like veg or relax or play. So finding the right time to connect with your kid, this is like the biggest thing I could possibly give you, is just what time, knowing that time of day. For my kids, generally for my daughter and my older son, it's always at night. Of course it is. It's like 9, it's like right as they're going to bed and I'm like, okay, I'm done, good night. They want to like open up and pour their heart out. So, you know, that's kind of where my own executive function and planning comes in, that I have to plan for that, and I have to make sure that they're in bed at a time where I'm not anxious about it and I'm not like trying to rush them out, because this time is so key to the relationship I have with them. I'm giving them that attention. I love this idea of learning something new together, or using your child as and encouraging their authority, empowering them. So like if your child's really good at something, like my sons are really good at basketball, asking them to help me with shooting, or my daughter loves to craft, like having her teach me how to do something. It is such a great way to connect with them. That's kind of more of a low risk. It's you're empowering them and you put them in the spotlight. You're giving them all your attention. The phones are away. And that is just such a great way to connect. And then it's just this one's hard. I have in my private practice, like I'm thinking of this mom, her kid is 17, and for a really long time, like they had the means, they had the resources. If he was uncomfortable, if he was sad, they could fix it, like they could make it better. And so when he got older, he didn't have those skills. He didn't know how to be uncomfortable or upset. And at 17, it looks a lot harder than when they're 5 or 8 or even 12. So she resented him, like he was mean to her. And at 17, as a parent, you're like, when does this get better? Like I want my kid to be grateful for me and all that I do, and have a real conversation. They want nothing to do with me. And so having these opportunities to connect with them, like even if it's just sitting in the same room with them, asking them about something that, I don't care about video games, but if that's the only way in, I'm gonna find a way to try to offset all the negative things. We're constantly trying to juggle so much as busy parents. And so trying to be very intentional about implementing things that create positive connection with our kids is really important. And so the kind of blend here is 60-40. I would also say this goes to siblings as well. Like the sibling relationship sometimes needs support and cultivation, so that we're looking for opportunities to kind of get our kids bonding in positive ways, so that when they fight, that relationship is balanced. We don't want to have that imbalance where they're just constantly in conflict. Okay, so here's kind of the main takeaways that I have for you. When it comes to executive function and ways that we want to help connect with our kids, but also give them the tools that they need to self-regulate, we're gonna start with goals. So a lot of executive function, you need some kind of a driving force, like an anchor. Like we need to be moving towards something. And so we wanna, again, bring the subconscious to conscious. So I want to work with my children, and it doesn't matter. I do this in coaching. I do this here with your kids. I just want to know, what is it that you want? What makes you tick? What makes you happy? Right now, my son wants to go to Duke and play basketball. I don't really care. He's going to college. Okay, this is a win. So I'm going to do what I can as a parent to affirm that for him, and ultimately help him with that goal, right? So a lot of his choices in middle school are gonna be like, well, to go to Duke, you have to do this. So it's really helpful when your child has a goal. I know a lot of kids too that are scared of goals. And so again, it's kind of meeting them where they're at. And so a goal doesn't have to be this overarching thing like Duke. A goal could just be like, I want to make it to the next level of gymnastics. And getting them kind of thinking about that practice and how they can practice. Explicit language, I think I need to create some kind of a sheet, because I do feel like with executive function, this piece is so important. Your children need to kind of have the language to bridge the upstairs and downstairs brain. And so the feeling component is definitely a part of it, but also being able to express how to get things done. Like there's a system I can show you and share with you about I think it's prep, it's like prep, do, done. And so when we think about how kids execute tasks, a lot of kids don't know how to do the prep, or they don't know how to sustain attention to get it done. And so again, it's like having this explicit language of, oh, I think you're really struggling with your goal-directed persistence. Why don't we go ahead and just make a goal to stay focused for 20 minutes and then we'll take a break. Modeling emotional regulation, clear and explicit boundaries. This is a really important one. Being able to have clear boundaries with your kids so that they know that it is okay to have big feelings. This behavior is not okay though. So we don't want to be permissive parents. We want to be sturdy parents. So knowing what your boundaries are is incredibly important. If you don't want your child to speak to you in a negative way, with a certain tone, these are things that they need to know that is not okay with you, and then you need to consistently YouTube is not okay in our house, like the YouTube shorts. We don't allow it. If they're on it, the remote gets taken away. Like, it's a very clear boundary. They know what it is. They can test it all they want, but there's always going to be a consistent response from me and my husband. Visuals always. For our neurodivergent kids, some of our kids are auditory processing, some are visual processing, some are the more just hands-on learning, but always visuals. If you're struggling to get your child to do anything, it's probably because they may need some kind of visual. I love to have my children either make their own checklists or make it with them. For my smaller children, it's going to be pictorial or visuals, but the visuals is, I think, one of the things that our kids with neurodivergence struggle with the most is visualizing, what does a clean room look like? Or like in the process of cleaning a room, how do I get started? What's the task initiation of that? I think learning from one another in the context of just anything, like learning from our children. My children teach me things every day. Learning from each other. I learn so much from you and the community around me. So being open to this idea of a growth mindset, obviously we're here, so we don't have all the answers, myself included. And I think having that mindset is something that mirrors and helps our children as well. And then this last one is mind bind, which I think that this is a really cool. So this woman, her name is Sarah Ward. She is, her husband had a traumatic brain injury and thus lost all of his executive function. And so she became an expert, consequently had a neurodiverse child, and was able to utilize all this amazing research with her neurodiverse child. And so her work really has kind of rested in this idea of visualization, and that our kids that struggle with neurodiversity struggle with visualizing and the language behind tasks. So this kind of language within our own brain. So it's a blend of like speech language pathology, executive function, brain science, education. So she has this thing kind of like about future thinking and miming it. And she has this acronym for MIME. So the M is the schematic future thinking. Make an image, stop, what will it look like? And that's kind of like, when you think about it, like let's say use this idea of cleaning our room. So we want our kids to have a clean and tidy space. It's really important for our health and well-being to kind of have a space where we can go to that feels safe and clean. What does it look like? So making sure that they have a visual, whether you take a picture of a clean room or you show them a clean room, but that they can visualize this room being clean. Episodic future thinking. What do I look like? Self-projection. So what does it look like when you're cleaning your room? And you go through these things with your child. You can do this kind of work in any scenario. So any kind of thing that feels hard for your kid, if it's a transition, if it's the routine, getting ready to go to school, if it's going to bed, trying to imagine in their brains, what does it look like when we do this thing, and putting themselves in the future. This is really important. And mental time travel, so temporal spatial, how am I moving to achieve this? So that's kind of where you're gonna be like, what's the prep work? What do I need to do to be able to achieve this? What does it look like to, well, it's not just starting the task of putting my clothes away, it's then getting all the trash off the floor, and then maybe making my bed, and then finally putting all my toys away. And then the future emotion. What do you think it will feel like when your room is clean? Probably gonna feel really good. You're gonna feel peaceful. You're gonna know where everything is. You're gonna have a sense of control. Like this might, so helping them process that emotion. So then when you tell your child on Saturday morning, okay, we're gonna do the room clean, they now have some type of sense of what this is going to look like, and that will give them a better sense of control. Finally, the power of storytelling. So storytelling it's an ancient art. It's been something that's been around so I used to teach ancient civilizations at St. Paul's in Clearwater. And so it's so fascinating. Storytelling is something that, the earliest ancestors that we have documented, they did. That's how they passed on their history, was through oral storytelling. They gathered around a fire. It was bridging connection. So I find storytelling to be one of the most powerful tools we have as parents. Whether it is you sharing an experience that you went through that will connect your child to you. All of a sudden, you're not mom, you're not dad, you're not this authority figure, you're just like them, and you can share a story of when you struggled with something. Gosh, when I was in college, I didn't know how to study for tests either. I used to leave it to the last minute, and it felt really bad when I would study all night long and then get a 70 on my test. These moments help our child see us as, you know, on their level, and this will help with connection. Storytelling is also helping for, like, you know, again, like prepping them for these difficult experiences. It's great for guided imagery and meditation. So if you're wanting to get them into their parasympathetic nervous system, more regulated state, telling a story, like I have these beautiful cards where one of the stories is about like connecting with your family and walking in a magical forest. So storytelling is so incredibly powerful, helping our children, but also with connection, and then the recall of the day and integrating their brain. So this is just a great place to start if you are looking for one thing to walk away with, being able to just have that deeper connection with your children. So as a summary, executive function is our ability to create and keep a conscious awareness of what we want, which is a goal, with our, and the capacity to sustain attention to tasks, tolerate failure and distractions until we achieve it. We can't access our executive function if we are not okay with bad emotion. Like, this emotional regulation piece is so key to how we get our kids to execute and feel confident with who they are and where they are. And so this kind of happens where we take the subconscious, that fight, flight, or freeze, those primal reflexes where we want to avoid discomfort, we want to avoid tasks that are boring, that are stupid. Like, my teacher assigned the dumbest task, I'm not doing that. Being able to have our children to be resilient and sit with that, they need to then have those goals and this conscious thought of like, you know what though, but that stupid task is gonna help me to do well, and that's gonna get me to where I wanna go. So I will tell you this in full disclosure. So first of all, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being here. My sister and I were chit-chatting on the way in, and you know, I'm a little nervous. Like, this is intimidating. It's not, I could talk about this all day long. I prepped for this, but I really truly don't feel like I'm a parenting expert. Like, cat's out of the bag. I am just like you. And so when I think about my own kids and what I want for them, these are kind of the tips and things that have really helped me connect with them. But one size doesn't fit all, and just know that whatever you're doing for your child is helping them. You are an expert on your own kid, and I'm an expert on my own kid. And so just showing up, having these conversations, participating in their lives, you know, trying to get them all the services, it will make a difference. Michael Dellman was right. Your kid is going to be okay. And I will just leave you with this one little anecdote. My sister and I were chit-chatting. Her son is dyslexic. He was diagnosed in first grade, had expressive language. He has ADHD. Like, he had a lot of things going on with him, and it's been a hard journey. He's had explosive tantrums. He's hated school. I mean, viscerally, like, did not want to ever do homework, dragged his feet getting up and out of the house, and just consistently through love and her own kind of journey into therapy and seeking resources and connecting into the community. She's now got an 8th grader who's applying to Jesuit, who's a straight A student, who reads on grade level, who doesn't hate school anymore. So I just have to let you know that it doesn't really matter right now if it feels super hard, because you're here and because you are doing the work, your kid is going to get where they need to go. So. Let's open up for any questions or discussion. What's something you heard or something sticking with you, circling around in your mind that you are thinking about? Yes.
I wonder if you can speak more to the MIME 10-minute, to like elaborate on how that works or how you utilize that.
Which one?
The not the MIME, the 10-minute
Oh,
SIFT. That's what it was.
The SIFT, the 10-minute, yeah. So it's kind of a blend of 2 different strategies. So I love this group called Big Little Feelings, and they have the 10-minute miracle. And so when my kids were little, especially my neurodivergent kid, they kind of offer the strategy, just take 10 minutes of your day, 10 minutes, and sit with them and do Legos or do whatever they want. And so within that time, you're just asking your kids. So this is kind of how I do it. Like with my oldest son, or even my daughter, you know, you're doing something really low risk, that they're in a comfortable place, they feel safe. And you just ask them, you know, what are you sensing right now? What does your body feel like? and they might say, oh, well, my, I feel my heart beating and my belly's rumbling, or I'm feeling happy and I'm spending time with you. Okay, well, what's the images in your mind? What picture do you see? Close your eyes, tell me what you see. Oh, I'm thinking about Christmas and I want baby alive dolls. Oh, okay. What do you feel right now? Oh, I feel happy, I'm with you. Or, oh, I feel tired, or I feel like I don't want to go to bed, I'm mad, just trying to get them to utilize the language and helping them if they don't have it, because not all kids are going to be able to say that. We've got little babies that can't say that. So this is really for more school-age kids that can. And then the thoughts, what are you thinking about? And so that's a fun one, because sometimes it'll be super random. With my older, older kids, they're thinking about, oh, I got this test tomorrow. Oh, I want to go play Fortnite. Oh, can I go watch YouTube now? So yeah, that's how I use it though. And as often as possible, yeah.
So for a younger kid who maybe doesn't realize that they are thinking, how do I bring that forward for him so that he can give me the words or like the concept?
I would just experiment with and ask them, how old's your child?
4.
Yeah, so I would just ask them. I think that, maybe even starting with are you so the thought thing is tricky because they might not even know what a thought is. So I think, kind of starting with helping them understand that, sometimes our brain has, something in, we're thinking something like an affirmation. I am fun, I think that I would model it. That's what I would do. I would model to my daughter who's 5. I would say, okay, let's talk about our thoughts. I'm thinking about going outside after our talk. What are you thinking about? And I'm sure he'll have something crazy, thinking about spaghetti, who knows? But yeah, just trying to start modeling for them. That's really the best way to do it. And this is something that really also is very interesting to me. When I make a mistake, my go-to is to self-deprecate. What the hell? You're so stupid. Oh my God, I'm so mad. I'm so hard on myself. And I started noticing that within my own children, so I think the modeling thought out loud is truly the way to do it. And that's how I would do it as a teacher. That's how I've done it with my kids. It's I'm thinking about what we're going to do after dinner. What are you thinking about? And then that kind of gives them that place to start. Anybody else? Yes.
Is there any chance that you're going to do any work with the lower kids, the primary kids?
So that's a good question. I just got these really fun cards that incorporate cross-body movement, rhythm, and executive function. And so there's so much cool science out there. I can't wait to have more of these, guys. So I hope that the next one that we're gonna do is gonna be a literacy panel on the science of reading. And we're gonna hopefully organize this during the book fair so that you guys can all come and kind of get into the spirit of the science of reading and how wonderful and enriching it is to our brains. And then I have a third one coming. Do you want to say something? Okay. But we're also going to have a book club. And I have some people in the room that I'm looking at. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot that have some really amazing, wonderful tools to offer for self-regulation, such as some sound healing and breath work. And, but also just, we have an amazing community with so many resources, even, within your own, what you have to offer. So I do think that we're gonna have a lot of offerings. We're trying to get into the works and offering of a club for, it'll be like a neuroscience club. So I think we might do that. And then we also are trying to get started a girl kind of empowerment group. So there's definitely I think that Country Day is such a cool place because our mantra this year for teaching was ceilingless growth. And so if you have an idea, if you have a need in the community, if you feel like there's something that you're seeing that we're not offering, please email me. I left it up here for you. We want to know. We want to know your experiences. We want to help. We want to serve as best as we can. And I think the more conversation we have around neurodiversity, the better we're going to be able to meet our children's needs.